Bryce Johnson from Expedition Bigfoot is breaking the news, and what he captured has stopped even the most skeptical scientists in their tracks. For years, we've heard reports from hunters, loggers, and hikers, but what was recorded deep in the Washington Cascades may finally prove that the legendary creature is real. Stay with me, because what Bryce discovered isn't just a figure in the trees. It's moving, it's breathing, and experts say it changes everything. Subscribe now before we continue. Bryce Johnson didn't join Expedition Bigfoot to chase fantasy. He joined to help prove, once and for all, whether there was any truth to one of America's oldest wilderness legends. As a seasoned host and field investigator, he treated each expedition like a scientific pursuit, structured, methodical, and based in reality. But what began as another meticulously planned multi-week survey in the remote Cascades quickly became something else entirely. Even before departure, something felt different. The region they were targeting wasn't just selected for sightings. It was chosen because new AI mapping software pulled decades of reports, acoustic anomalies, unexplained heat signatures, and tribal warning zones into a single overlap. On the map, it formed a distinctive red triangle, a location that, statistically, should have been impossible. The team expected elevated findings, maybe vocalizations, maybe track impressions, but Bryce felt an unease even before they set foot on the ground. Local guides refused to cross beyond a certain ridge, saying it was a place where the forest watches you. The remark was dismissed as folklore, until the crew noticed wildlife vanishing the deeper they went. Birdsong stopped. Even insects faded into silence. Bryce later described it as if the woods were holding their breath. The first 3 days went according to plan. Thermal scans, trail grid sweeps, flask sampling at stream beds, all standard. But on the fourth night, something shifted. Just past 2 a.m., an infrasound event rippled through camp. Gear elevated off surfaces by fractions of an inch. Cameras reset on their own. Bryce sat up in his tent, feeling the air pressure collapse, like standing under deep ocean water. He wasn't afraid yet. He thought it was seismic, but the sensors showed no geological activity. Instead, the pressure wave came from within the forest, in a direction where no wind was moving. That was the moment Bryce wrote 2 words in his field notebook: "It knows." The expedition team had one advantage no past Bigfoot search ever truly possessed: technology built to detect what human senses could not. For Season X, production approved a custom-built sensor array designed by a former aerospace engineer. It combined thermal imaging, long-range LiDAR, low-light adaptive optics, and directional infrasound monitors capable of mapping pressure waves in real time. Bryce Johnson was the first to insist on testing it in the field. He believed emotional bias could be removed if whatever they encountered was captured through tools instead of fear. What happened next proved his belief right and changed it forever. Late in the afternoon on day 5, the sensor tower placed along the ridge of the valley began showing irregular heat bursts approximately 8 feet off the ground. Not animal level, not human. The software estimated the heat mass at over 350 pounds, yet fully vertical, moving with deliberate restraint between trees. Bryce called for a manual verification. A drone equipped with thermal cameras launched silently above the canopy. The feed returned a figure: solid, heat-based, symmetrical. At first glance, it looked like a man, too large, too fluid, walking with a gait both heavy and unnervingly quiet. The software flagged something unexpected: stride length exceeding 52 inches. No human alive has a natural walking stride that long, especially not at that height. Then came the part that silenced the room. The AI refused to classify it as any known animal species. The system displayed a warning Bryce had never seen during an investigation: unknown biological entity, humanoid structure. Still skeptical, Bryce requested a second sensor confirmation, this time using LiDAR to test depth and shape. The scan returned surface contours: broad chest, defined shoulder roll, elongated forearms. The motion analysis showed no light compensation. Whatever was being tracked was not reflecting light. It was absorbing it. "That's when I felt it," Bryce later said. "The moment technology stopped protecting me from what my eyes didn't want to see." He kept watching the screen. The figure turned toward the drone, and briefly, unmistakably, Nobody seemed to look back. Before Bryce captured the footage that now dominates scientific debate, the forest had already been communicating, just not in ways people were willing to acknowledge. It started with the trees. On the morning of day 6, the team found fresh twists in saplings along a ravine line. Not broken, not cut, twisted. A full rotation at the base, still rooted in the ground. It would take hundreds of pounds of controlled force to do that without snapping them. Local search and rescue teams later reported that similar tree manipulations had been documented during missing person searches, always in clusters, always along silent trails. Then came the rock formations, perfectly balanced stacks of 3, each stone weighing nearly 30 to 40 pounds, perched on elevated tree stumps 5 feet off the ground. No footprints around them, no drag marks. Bryce noted that they looked less like markers and more like warning, almost territorial, as if placed deliberately at eye level. By nightfall, vocal recordings added to the unease. The parabolic mics picked up a deep-toned resonance, too low for known animal calls, too structured for random noise. The sound signature appeared to mimic the cadence of human breathing, but scaled. The waveform showed long inhalation cycles, powerful exhalations, repeating roughly every 8 seconds. No known primate fits that pattern. Team members reported a sensation many describe in paranormal contexts, but rarely during biological encounters: being watched with intent. Even the crew's trained wildlife tracker, typically composed, admitted that several times he felt movement shadowing him from the tree line. Closely, intelligently, in sync with his steps, as though it was matching his rhythm. But the most unsettling sign came from their thermal perimeter alarm around 3:18 a.m. Something large moved just outside the detection border. Not fast, not frantic, casual, almost curious. A single camera, just one, captured what appeared to be a broad silhouette crouching behind a fallen log. It stayed motionless for 47 seconds before standing, rising, slowly. 2 frames were usable. In one, only the shape is visible. In the next, a patch of visible eye shine glints off the low nightlight. No glare from a flashlight, no artificial reflection. Eye shine at that height, that spacing, Bryce later said, did not match anything we're supposed to be tracking. The forest wasn't simply reacting, it was anticipating. By the time the team moved deeper into the ridge valley, everything in their surroundings felt slightly wrong. Bryce described it as if the forest's natural rhythm had stopped and something else had replaced it. Wildlife activity didn't vanish, it reorganized. No birds, yet the sound of branches shifting overhead, no small game, but movement, like a single set of heavy steps pacing parallel to their path. More disturbing still, insects continued their nighttime hum everywhere except directly behind the crew, where the air seemed unnaturally still and silent, trailing them like a moving vacuum. Late into day 7, technician Ben Walker detected electromagnetic fluctuations that pulsed in patterned intervals. Not random spikes, measured surges occurring exactly every 90 seconds. The readings spread over a quarter-mile radius, as if something was moving through multiple points and releasing energy. Bryce noted they aligned with elevation contours, almost like strategic positioning. The team later referred to this as the pulse grid and theorized something was mapping them. Then came the footprints, 18-inch impressions sunk deep into moss and loam. The stride measured over 6 feet from heel to heel, with no sag or drag between steps. Whatever made them walked with confidence and impeccable balance. The prints were fresh, and partially overlapping tire tracks left by their support vehicle less than 2 hours earlier. They weren't observing from a distance anymore. That night at camp, Bryce recalled hearing a low guttural sound, steady, rhythmic, almost like chanting carried through windless air. The words weren't clear, but the tone implied intention rather than instinct. It was followed by 3 tree knocks at precise intervals, easily 200 yards apart, triangulating their location. The team leader issued a silent retreat for night discipline. No lights, minimal movement. But 30 minutes later, the thermal cameras captured heat signatures closing in from 2 angles. Not sprinting, not stalking, approaching, upright, calculated. A tall figure paused just beyond sensor range for nearly 1 minute. Crew members later said that silence felt like an interrogation, as if whatever was there was studying them, not deciding whether to attack, but whether to allow them to remain. Bryce whispered to his mic, "It's not hiding from us anymore. It's waiting. And that's when he realized the moment they pressed forward would determine whether they captured evidence or became part of it. The next morning, Bryce reviewed the thermal recordings from the previous night. At first glance, the data looked corrupted. Frames skipping, pixel warping, heat signatures vanishing mid-motion. But when one clip was isolated, enhanced, and slowed frame by frame, the distortion cleared just long enough to reveal something that froze the entire command tent. There, between the silhouette of two cedar trunks, stood a tall figure, upright, broad-shouldered, with an elongated gait and clearly defined head-to-toe thermal mass. No fur blur, no anomalous heat bloom, just a fully articulated biped. The outline showed arms longer than human average, hands dangling beyond thigh level, and musculature that moved with slow, controlled breathing. Bryce later described it as not animal-like, but eerily deliberate, a living thing deciding how much of itself we were allowed to see. The recording captured exactly 4.6 seconds of exposure before the figure stepped behind a tree and vanished completely. No visible retreat, no detectable heat trail. The environment normalized immediately, as though whatever was there simply ceased occupying the space. Crew operators ran heat ladder calculations, temperature gradients that typically show residual thermal traces from moving organisms. Nothing. The ground where it stood showed no heat transfer. Forest density metrics indicated no disruption. It was as if the entity projected heat without interacting with its surroundings. What made this clip even more disturbing wasn't what they saw, but what followed. Exactly 5 seconds after disappearance, the audio sensors picked up a deep, sudden exhale directly behind Bryce's mobile mic, despite no visual presence at that location. Crew described it as a single breath, full, controlled, like someone testing how close they could get without being detected. At that moment, Bryce's heart rate spiked to 168 beats per minute. The team initiated a containment protocol for all electronic files. 3 separate backup drives were created, sealed, and placed in Faraday cases. But within minutes, 2 of the drives corrupted. Only 1 remained intact. Later that evening, meteorological logs indicated a sudden drop in localized air pressure, only in the immediate radius around camp. Microscopic spores were detected in the air samples, unknown to their environmental catalog. Lab analysis later classified them as originating from high-altitude pine species, over 60 miles away. Something had been close enough to leave biological traces. And just when the crew believed they had the breakthrough, they realized their investigation had crossed into something that chose when to be seen. Bryce said one chilling line that marked the turning point of the entire expedition. Maybe we didn't capture it. Maybe it allowed itself to be captured. From that moment on, they stopped asking if Bigfoot exists and started asking what it wanted from them. After the footage was secured, tension inside the expedition tent spiraled. Bryce noted that for the first time in the show's history, the team wasn't chasing something. They were reacting to it. What came next challenged not only what they believed about Bigfoot, but what they believed about consciousness itself. Around 2:17 a.m., as they reviewed sensor logs, the crew detected a single, low-frequency oscillation coming from the North Hillside. Too controlled to be wind, too steady to be animal. It was measured at 19 hertz, a frequency known as the fear resonance threshold, low enough to trigger unease in humans without being consciously audible. That didn't happen by accident. Tech specialist Ben ran the audio through spectral analysis. The waveform displayed evenly spaced modulations, almost linguistic in structure, not language, but patterned intention. It repeated 3 times, with the final surge peaking exactly when Bryce looked toward the forest edge on the external-facing camera, as if whatever was emitting it responded to his awareness. Moments later, seismic sensors picked up slight tremors, not a quake, impact pulses, 5 compressions, precisely 41 seconds apart. Later tests showed they aligned with the average time between the team's radio transmissions, almost as if something was syncing itself to their communication interval. Then came the most unsettling moment of the night. Bryce, visibly shaken on camera, reported a feeling of being watched from within the tree line. He described it as not an observer, an evaluator. The thermal rig scanned that direction. Nothing appeared, but on playback, a transparent shift in pixel density spiked for one frame. A body-sized distortion moved through the air like heat mirage, even though ground temperature readings remained constant. At 2:24 a.m., every monitor inside the tent glitched simultaneously. Not static, a uniform gray flash, with a code-like sequence of vertical lines. Frame analysts later discovered the bars matched exactly the ratios of the earlier tree knock triangulation. Whatever was out there wasn't just reacting, it was responding, it was learning, and worst of all, it was beginning to initiate. One member of the crew quietly whispered off-camera, "We're not tracking it anymore. It's tracking our thoughts." They shut down camp protocols immediately. But deep down, Bryce knew that was only its first reply. The team expected activity to escalate physically, broken branches, rapid pursuit, maybe even vocalizations. But what unfolded challenged every known pattern of animal behavior. Because what came next wasn't a chase in the traditional sense, it was a choreographed response. At 2:28 a.m., Bryce stepped outside the tent with the body-mounted thermal rig. Film director Ronnie advised against it, but Bryce insisted, his words recorded as, "It's watching us adapt. We need to signal we're not afraid." The area was unnaturally calm. Wind readings dropped to 0. All wildlife audio, insects, tree birds, distant coyotes, cut out simultaneously. According to audio analytics, this loss of natural sound took place within exactly 1.4 seconds across a 100-yard perimeter. As if someone muted the forest, analyst Miriam later described. Then Bryce stopped, completely still. The infrared feed captured something the human eye couldn't see. A movement deep within the brush, almost like the air bending. But instead of aggressive advancement, it mirrored his posture. Bryce stepped forward. The distortion receded. He stepped back. It advanced. Each motion occurred with a 0.7-second delay, like an echo of intention. His pulse, measured through his vest monitors, spiked from 78 to 141 beats per minute in under 4 seconds. Then, the scorched branch. A fallen limb by Bryce's left side suddenly split with a crack, not from impact, but from pressure. No visible contact. The wood fibers peeled outward as if pushed by invisible force. Heat imaging detected a temperature rise around it, from 47 degrees Fahrenheit to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, without any external source. At the same moment, Bryce whispered, "It's trying to show me something." He later said those words didn't feel like his own. Suddenly, the forest gave back its sound, but now only one voice was heard, a single, guttural exhale, close but untraceable. Not animal, not human. Bryce's final words as he retreated were nearly inaudible on camera. "It knows what we're afraid of, and it doesn't have to chase us. It already has us where it wants." He returned to camp without ever being touched, because the encounter wasn't about distance. It was about proximity of thought. By dawn, the forest returned to normal. Birds resumed their calls, and the breeze rustled through tree crowns as if the previous night had never happened. But back at the command tent, when analysts began reviewing the thermal, audio, and biometric data, the illusion shattered. What the team captured didn't just prove that something was there, it suggested it was intentionally interacting with their technology. It started with the infrared rig Bryce wore. The system recorded standard forward POV until 2:29:41 a.m., when for precisely 5 frames, the image changed. It shifted from Bryce's perspective to an elevated angle looking down at him, as if someone or something was filming from above. The metadata didn't show a camera switch. No drone was in the air. Yet those frames clearly displayed Bryce, viewed from a position nearly 12 feet off the ground, standing completely alone. No crew, no visible source for the footage. This angle would require physical equipment, and yet the data identified the footage as originating from Bryce's own thermal device. Then came the audio anomaly. Hidden deep under the forest ambient track was a layered low-frequency pulse, repeating every 3.2 seconds from the moment Bryce stepped out alone. Audio specialist Miriam isolated it, enhanced the waveform, and described it as sounding like an exhale through water, followed by something clicking. Side-by-side comparisons to known wildlife returned no matches. But the most disturbing discovery came from Bryce's biometric data. 3 minutes before any visual anomaly appeared, his heart rate spiked. Not from fear, but from a sudden surge in dopamine and norepinephrine, consistent with someone staring directly at a threat. Yet, at that exact moment, Bryce said in his post-analysis review, he wasn't looking at anything. He described it as feeling watched by something that hadn't appeared yet. Layered over the thermal interference frames, analysts noticed subtle distortion resembling facial structure, elongated brow ridge, forward-set eyes, matching eyewitness sketches collected decades ago, only visible with thermal inversion and only for half a second. The final note from the technical report reads, the subject was not detected entering the frame. The frame was reoriented around the subject. In other words, the creature didn't step into view. It pulled the camera into its view. Bryce Johnson sat down to review the data one last time. He didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then, with his head lowered, he finally said what no one on the team wanted to admit. That thing. It knew we were here. It wanted to be seen. It wasn't caught on camera. It caught us. He explained that what disturbed him most wasn't what he saw, but what he felt. The entity wasn't just an animal. It wasn't running from us. It was waiting, almost curious. Bryce concluded the team would never release the unedited footage. Not because it was unclear, but because it was too clear. He looked into the camera and whispered, this wasn't evidence of Bigfoot. This was contact. And then he stood up, refusing to review it again.